All right, with so much trade news over the last day and a half, one thing that we forgot to cover over on the basketball bulletin here is news on everyone's favorite player. Not really, but I don't know why I'm being so dramatic. Lonnie Walker. So I'm excited to see what we have here about Lonnie. It does appear that he could potentially be headed back to the NBA. Let me know what you guys think. I don't know if Lonnie's a guy that shouldn't be in the NBA right now. I think that he's somebody that's good enough to be in the NBA. He may be a casualty of there not being enough spots across rosters due to us needing expansion, things like that. There are several guys, in my opinion, that fall under that specific umbrella. Maybe Lonnie winds up being one of those guys. He does have his deficiencies, of course. He's not a perfect player by any means, but I do think he's an awesome player. He can go out there, get you buckets, particularly off the bench. And some of these teams that are listed here could use the scoring punch he could give them. And I felt like he should have probably got a long-term deal, whether that was mid-level, biannual, something, right? I felt like he should have got that coming off that playoff run where the Lakers went to the Western Conference Finals. He had that big blow-up game where he just decimated Golden State. But he, I believe, was forced to take a minimum deal with the Nets after that, which is kind of crazy. So we're going to talk about all this. Let me know what you guys think about what I was just talking about. We're going to also not really cover his stint overseas because he's killing it, but that's typically what you would expect. But we are going to take a look at some of his previous NBA numbers because he's been in the NBA or was in the NBA for about 6 years prior to going overseas. We're going to talk about all of that. So Lonnie Walker IV is drawing NBA interest and can be bought out of his contract with Lithuania in the EuroLeague by any NBA team until February 18th. So there's some sort of clause in there, and that's really smart of the agent to set that up, of course, so where he's able to leave the EuroLeague team and come back to the NBA if his contract is bought out by the 18th. So that's pretty huge for him. That's a little bit after the deadline there, a couple weeks after the deadline. And I think that puts them in a position where they can kind of canvas the league. Okay, now that some of the teams have picked the direction, where everybody probably should have picked the direction at that point. Okay, these guys are sellers. They sold everything. Maybe there's an opportunity for Lonnie here to come in, put up a bunch of shots, look good, and get a longer-term deal after that. Maybe a contending team could use a scoring guard off the bench, scoring wing off the bench. I think that puts them in a good position after all the deals are done, basically, aside from buyout stuff. Potential suitors, which I guess he would fall under that umbrella as well, too, I guess. Potential suitors are said to include the 76ers, Timberwolves, Heat, Nuggets, and the Celtics. So I talked about maybe a rebuilding team or things like that. They obviously aren't trying to win too much, but I'm not sure Lonnie swings the needle enough to where he will force you to win some games too much. But these are teams that are not trying to rebuild right now. There's a mix of contenders in here or, previous champions. The last couple champions are listed here. These are good teams, right? So that's where things are interesting. And he went to training camp with Boston prior to the season starting, was cut, unfortunately, of course, as you see, but was unfortunately cut, didn't make the roster. But moving on from that, it's interesting to see that the Celtics still do like Lonnie and still wanted him. If I remember correctly, it's been a while, but it wasn't a situation like they didn't like Lonnie or anything like that. They just didn't have a spot for him on the roster is what it was, if I remember. Or maybe it was that, or it was a money-based thing. So anyway, yeah, that could be good for them if they pick him up. The Nuggets could obviously use. So the Nuggets are in a weird position because they've got probably the best creator in the league right now in Jokic. But at the same time, having another guy out there that can get his own would be massive. And that's why the Nuggets were kind of in on, for a while, we haven't heard anything about it anyway recently, but they were kind of in on Zach LaVine, right? Trying to get somebody out there that can get their own, create a little bit for others, things like that. The Heat, they're kind of just, they're a well-oiled machine. I'd be curious to see if the Heat are suitors after a potential Jimmy trade, because that's something that would have already resolved by here. The Timberwolves could use more scoring punch off the bench from the guard position. That's fair. Although I do like the guys that they bring in for them, like DiVincenzo, they bring in Alexander Walker. I do like what they have kind of already. I'm not sure Lonnie would be in a position to get a lot of minutes, particularly also with those guys and just being ahead of him in the rotation. The 76ers, I mean, they're starting to come up. They're starting to come up. So I don't really have many thoughts on them and how he would potentially fit there. I'd have to kind of see more about them specifically and how they've been doing recently because I haven't checked in on them in a while. But nonetheless, in theory, sounds like it could be a good fit. Now, I wanted to take a look at some of what Lonnie has done in his NBA career. But first, I wanted to remind you, make sure you subscribe to this channel. If you haven't already, 80% of viewers are not subscribed. So now that you've made it about 4 or 5 minutes in, it's clear that you enjoy it. Make sure you subscribe. Also, hit that thumbs up. I'd greatly appreciate if you guys could help us hit that like goal I've set, which is 250 likes. It's very easy to do. It does require people to work together, of course, but it's free and it takes a second. So literally 1 second. So do it. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. So here's Lonnie over his career. And did I say 6 years? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I was on the money with that. That was kind of a guesstimate. Played 6 years, 4 with the Spurs, 1 with the Nets last time he was in the NBA, and the year with the Lakers. One thing that I thought was pretty interesting is the way that he kind of turned himself into being a more reliable shooter over his last couple of years. There was a period, like, because obviously I watch every Laker game, there was a period where he was closer to 40% for a good stretch of the season. We're going to talk a little bit more about his Lakers stint here, having watched, that entire run. So I'll have a lot more in-depth analysis I can do for that situation that he had there. But I do like how he turned himself into a better shooter. Yeah, he had 38 here, 40 here, but the volume and games played, 17 games on not even 1 attempt per game, technically 1.5, 1.7 basically here, 40. That's okay. But this is more like if you've got a good spacing center, like they're maybe taking 1.5, maybe 2 per game, but he spikes up to 4.7, 5, 4.4, 4.7, 36, 38. I like that a lot. So Lonnie is somebody that's not going to be out there playmaking a lot for you. He's not going to be a defensive player. He's not going to generate much in the way of stocks for you. He is more or less just give him the ball and let him create. He's a bucket. That's what he is. And that's kind of what the numbers suggest with Lonnie. When you look at him in terms of the profile for him, let me show you this as well. The usage is pretty high. The usage is actually pretty high, aside from the Laker year. So the tricky thing with the Laker year is there's LeBron, there's AR, of course, there's AD. But that year, that was the year that the Lakers started the season with Russ and Beverly and Nunn and all these guys are playing, and the guys I mentioned previously. So Lonnie was just in a weird spot. Like, it was just weird. And then midway through the year at the deadline, they shift the roster, bring in Vando and those guys. And then Lonnie finds himself out of the rotation. So it just was a weird situation to be in if you're Lonnie that year. He also was dealing with some injuries as well. He's not been able to avoid the injury bug throughout his career all too great, but he was dealing with some injuries too, kind of came back, didn't really have a spot in the rotation. Let me go ahead and just make this bigger because I see you guys can't really see it too good. So, so that's what it is. But also, he's a little bit of a chucker. So while the usage is high, the points per shot attempt, 37th percentile, 47th, 21. I'm not going to compare this to other players with a similar archetype, but I'd have to imagine being below 50% is not great. Last year in the league, 109.8, not great. Also, assist percentage here, not great. There was a season in San Antonio where it was better, 76th percentile, but typically, 50% or below. Assist to usage ratio, not good at all. So he's got the ball in his hands, but doesn't really create much for it. He's going to put a shot up, could wind up being inefficient, but he's somebody that can he can score from anywhere on the court, could make your team better in terms of that. Now, in terms of the on-off numbers for Lonnie, so basically, if you look at his entire career, it's a little bit unfair to judge him on some of the Spurs years, or probably all of them, because they weren't a winning team for that period. Although you would still like to see a younger guy, that's playing a good amount of minutes be a positive for them. And basically, blue, anything other than like orange is not all that good. And he doesn't really have much orange anywhere throughout his entire career that you can see here. Now, if we look at defense, because it's getting cropped out, defense is the right side. Again, he's actually been, should I say better on defense? I don't think that's fair to say, but yeah, I guess lately he's been better on defense. Like his Brooklyn year, he was pretty good actually across. That's the one year where he actually has a positive in diff. So that's the best year of his career, like statistically, like advanced statistically, right? So defense and offense, he was a positive for them when he was on the court. But every other year in his career, including the Laker year, especially on defense, my God, that that Laker year on defense, 13th percentile, 14th, 30th, just not good. Every other year in his career, he's not been good. So that being said, we go ahead and take a look at some of the lineup data. And we're going to talk a little bit about both of the last couple of years he's been in the league and what you would maybe be seeing in terms of trends for Lonnie here. So the last year he was in the league with the Nets, like I said, while that was the best advanced stat year of his career, the main lineup he was used in, and he was coming off the bench, if I remember correctly, because all of his lineups are pretty spread out. A lot of like low possession size, low sample size lineup groups here. So not the craziest thing. But the main lineup he was used with was Claxton, O'Neal, and then Walker, Cam Thomas, and Dennis Smith Jr. And then you make a swap here and you bring in like Schroeder, you bring in Mikal, and then all of a sudden it's a majorly better group. But that's probably also just because Mikal is out there. And then that's more or less the trend that you see here. Actually, Dinwiddie as well, super good when he was there too. So the data for him is kind of tricky, but I want to see the lineup data for the Laker year because, like I said, he was in a position where he played in a lot of funky lineups. Like, look at this. The main lineup he was in, Thomas Bryant, LeBron, Lonnie, Pat Bev, and Dennis. I forgot they had Dennis Schroeder too. Dude, that team just had way too many guards. Holy crap, that team was nothing but guards. That team was nothing but guards, dude. Holy crap. I forgot about that. Yeah, so he was a negative with that group, but I mean, can you really blame him? Look at the group. Can you look at the group? You got LeBron out there, but that's like, and he was good in terms of offensive rebounding percentage, free throw rate. Like he was good on some of the defensive metrics like we saw. The next group he was with the most was a group with LeBron, AD, Lonnie at the small forward again, Pat Bev, and Dennis Schroeder. So you're taking Thomas off and you're putting in AD. You get 9 points better, but still largely negatives with the offense on that grouping, which is kind of crazy that the defense is better than the offense with these pairings. Maybe not, because you got Pat Bev out there. Yeah, probably not. Actually, can we take Pat Bev out of the groups? Can we do that? Can we just look at this? Look at how many players they had on their team this year. Can we take Pat Bev out of the group? My God. Let's just take Pat Bev off. Let's see what we have here. So Lonnie, yeah, okay. Well, when you take Pat off, the lineups get, I guess, better. AR, Russ, Lonnie, LeBron, AD. I think that was a starting group they had for a period there, but the offense was blistering. Oh my God, the offense was through the roof. 90th percentile in points per possession with that group. The defense was abysmal, but the offense was crazy. But because the defense, points per possession, 132, was so bad, he still gets a negative diff of 2.4. We take a look here at some of the other stuff here. Negative lineup there with the next most used one, third most used one, Troy Brown, and then you slot Lonnie at the shooting guard, and then you have a big positive group. So one thing, and that lends me to my next thing with Lonnie. One thing I noticed when looking at his player data is that he actually, throughout his career, has spent a good amount of his time. He's listed at 6'5" here. I think he's more like 6'4", maybe 6'4.5", I guess. But he's not very big. He's very slender too. But one thing I noticed is he spent a good portion of his career playing up in positions. I mean, look at this. He spent 12% of his minutes that Laker year at power freaking forward. Darvin, my God, they just had so many guards that year. He spent 63% of his minutes that year at small forward, 25 at the shooting guard position. And I'm pretty sure that when he was at the shooting guard position and not forced to play up and guard up, he was much better. And that's where, like I said, with the Spurs thing, some of the numbers can be a little bit tricky based on a bunch of different factors, right? We take a look here at his last year in the league. He played 40% at small forward, 8% at point guard, and then the other 50 at shooting guard, 2% at power forward. But that's like not even, no, we're not going to talk about that. But yeah, so my point is he spent a good portion of his career playing almost a pretty almost even split between the 2 and the 3 over the last few years in the career. Like his last Spurs year, 58 and 39 between shooting guard and small forward. So they do try to play him up. In fact, his first and second year, he was playing a lot of small forward, it looks like, or second year in the league. 76% of his minutes were there. So kind of been in a weird position overall. So Lonnie is somebody that, as the numbers tell you, and as the eye test would tell you, is out there to score the bucket, and he can do that. So the last thing I wanted to kind of take a look at is more or less the per 36 numbers for him. And like I said, with a heavy focus in the last couple of years, but for Brooklyn, he was putting up 20 points per game, 4 rebounds, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. That's pretty good. And then for the Lakers, the year prior, 18 points, 3 rebounds, 1.5 assists, or 2 assists basically. And then the year prior, the last year with the Spurs, where he really started to come into his own, 19-4-4, 19-4-3. The 3-point percentage, like I said, 31, 36, 38. The overall field goal percentage for his career is 42%. So more or less, you guys kind of have the full rundown on Lonnie Walker. Now, I wanted to kind of go back to the teams that are interested in him one final time. And that is, and these are potential teams. This doesn't mean that one of these teams will get him. It could be some team entirely out of left field. The Sixers, the Wolves, the Heat, the Nuggets, the Celtics as well. So who do you guys think will pick up Lonnie? Who do you guys think will, now that you've seen, maybe I've enlightened you to some stuff with him. Now that you've seen this, who do you guys think he would fit best with? Again, like I said in the beginning, regardless of some of the negative numbers, I do think Lonnie is somebody that should be in the NBA and can help a team win. In fact, I saw it in the playoffs, the biggest stage. We didn't even talk about playoff numbers. I guess I'll really, really briefly show you those. 48% in his I'm not going to talk about his 20-year playoff, like his like, what is that, first year in the league? The Laker year was the last year he was in the playoffs, of course. It's 48%, 38% from 3, 16 points per game in a per 36 sample. So he was pretty good in that playoff run. The 3-point shooting went up too. So now that you guys have seen all that stuff, what do you guys think about Lonnie? Who could benefit from him? Post down below. Also, if you guys didn't see, Trevor and I covered the DFS trade stuff in pretty good volume yesterday. So make sure you check those videos out, and we'll see you over there. Have an awesome day and take it easy, everybody.